Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tim Rex Greatness. Two of my favorite video essays have been about the BioShock franchise, the BioShock Infinite Rant, and my multi-part BioShock Analysis Special. But there's one I haven't covered yet, BioShock 2. I've never wrote anything about it, only mentioned it in passing in comparisons to the other two games, mostly because my thoughts on it are very mixed. Sometimes I do a run through and think, yeah, this game is better than I remember. Other times, I walk out feeling disappointed. On one hand, it's more of BioShock. That's always awesome. Well, usually. And a lot of the gameplay mechanics are improved upon, making it play even smoother than the first game. But sadly, the story was pretty cookie cutter, lacked any twists and turns that helped make the original so awesome, and the gameplay itself was way too easy. Subject Delta was an extremely OP anime character by the end with nothing able to stop him. The game's reception is still about the same as my own opinions. Mixed. Love it or hate it, BioShock 2 could have certainly turned out to be better and maybe even just as amazing as the first game. How? Simple. Look back at the original plans for the game and its story. There were some great ideas that wound up on the cutting room floor that could have saved BioShock 2 from being the one that no one really talks about anymore, from being the middle child of the series. I believe BioShock 2 Sea of Dreams could have been an awesome, thrilling, and memorable game that lived up to the expectations. By the way, I know the Sea of Dreams subtitle was dropped very early on, but gosh dang it, it sounds dramatic, so that's what I'll use to refer to the game's original vision. In this video, I'll be comparing what we got in BioShock 2 to some of the older, unused plans for the game, which I'll be calling Sea of Dreams. Deal with it. So, what could have been BioShock 2? Let's take a look. Following Andrew Ryan's monologue, Fort Frolic, and the whole "would you kindly" bit was definitely an insurmountable task for the developers at 2K Marin, but instead of putting their hearts and souls into crafting a new story, we got another Save the Girl story that we've seen 1,000 times since 1977. But what were the original ideas for where the sequel would take Rapture? Like many forgotten ideas, we can get a glimpse of them through the original Sea of Dreams teaser trailer, some old interviews with the developers, and the Hunting the Big Sister early test demo that showcased more of the story and flashy new features. What we begin to see, even from the very start, is the story of the Big Sister, a little sister who made it to the surface, grew up, and now misses her first home.
And one little sister was not like the others, and she couldn't leave Rapture behind. And she sort of disappears into the ocean one day, and then the abductions begin.
Although her motivations are unclear, she begins kidnapping young girls on the Atlantic coast and converting them into a new batch of little sisters, jump-starting the fallen city back to life. You still play as a Big Daddy. He probably wouldn't keep the name Subject Delta because this is the very first Big Daddy, so let's just call him Subject Alpha for now.
And so in Bio 2, you actually move sort of laterally in that ecology into the role of a Big Daddy. In fact, the very first.
Hey, maybe this is the one that killed Suchong. That would be cool, right? You may also notice that in the demo, this Subject Alpha is a Rosie model. Now, the Rosie just served as a stand-in for the eventual Alpha series design, but it's still a cool thing to note. Anyways, this prototype is awakened by Tenenbaum to stop Big Sister from repeating her past mistakes, discovering Adam and using children to gather it. It's a pretty interesting setup that gives us a good reason to return to Rapture past the very conclusive events of the first game. And Sea of Dreams lends itself to all the twists and turns the actual BioShock 2 was missing. Like, maybe the Big Sister was your little sister, so there would be a history or bond between them or something. What if Tenenbaum betrays you in the end because all you are is just a means to an end for her? How about if you have to find a way to destroy all of Rapture to erase its mistakes forever? Or maybe for a bad ending, you join Big Sister. These are all interesting possibilities that easily beat go find Eleanor at Fontaine Futuristics.
Where did she come from? Why is she doing what she's doing? And how did she she become the big sister?
Interestingly enough, Sea of Dreams' story was actually integrated in BioShock 2, but was designated more as backstory. Through audio diaries, we learn about a man named Mark Meltzer's quest to find his daughter who was kidnapped by a big sister. However, Delta doesn't really care about the kidnappings, he just wants to find Eleanor. From what I can tell, the Splicers didn't change much between hunting the big sister and the final product. They have the same models and attributes. The only real difference we see is that the Splicers aren't always bent on killing you. In BioShock 2, they treat Subject Delta like Jack, aka kill on sight. But in this potential Sea of Dreams, we see that the Splicers would be far more passive towards you, a big daddy, because you're higher on the food chain and can easily kill them. That is, unless there's a mob of them, then they'd strike. But of course, enemies that you can easily plow through wouldn't provide much challenge. We see this in the actual game. The biggest addition to Rapture's ecology is the Big Sister. And this is where more big differences come in. In the game we got, there were a bunch of them. The original Little Sisters grew up deadly and insane. Instead of letting them go to waste, they were converted into Big Sisters, a last line of defense in case the new girls ran into trouble. It's an alright concept, but they're kind of poorly implemented. Subject Delta only has to deal with them after harvesting or rescuing all the Little Sisters in an area, so you always know exactly when one is coming, breaking any tension. You can always set traps and prepare for them, making them just a slightly more difficult Big Daddy. Oh yeah, and Delta is still super overpowered, and can take care of them without a sweat after the first or second encounter. In Sea of Dreams, however, there was only one Big Sister, and she was the one calling the shots, not this Sophia Lamb who's been retconned into the storyline. Although we can't tell how exactly she would have been implemented into the gameplay, I think there's a lot of potential there. Maybe she could be something like Nemesis from the third Resident Evil, an indestructible monster that randomly appears to hunt you down and ruin your day. This would make Sea of Dreams way scarier than even the original. There's nothing scarier than being totally vulnerable in a game. Since Delta is wicked strong and always knows when she's coming, there's no stress there. But if she was invincible and you at random points got caught with your pants down, that would turn the wasted potential Big Sister into one of the most memorable villains of the 7th generation. Like the enemies, the gameplay doesn't seem to have changed too profoundly during development. Much of the gunplay looks about the same. There was still that annoying horde mode, and you were still able to traverse the ruins of Rapture from the outside. Although short-lived, those were certainly one of the most game-defining moments. Sadly, half of BioShock 2's playtime was doing the repetitive gatherings with Little Sisters. 2 entire levels are devoted to it, and it's highly prevalent through many others. Maybe in Sea of Dreams, you only have to do this once per girl instead of twice. I don't know, just make it work. The plasmids work the same too. Primarily, we've gotten to see Incinerate 3 still being the same crazy flamethrower attack from the released game. The plasmids were another cool improvement over the first game, being a more viable option and drastically changing their application with upgrades. Incinerate goes from just chucking fireballs to flamethrower hands. Cyclone Trap goes from the goofy whirlwind to an elemental storm that can decimate splicers from all directions. Another difference though is the drill. Instead of using drill fuel as ammo in BioShock 2, we see that the drill had infinite fuel, but needed a cooling period before overheating. We don't know much about the iconic Big Daddies and how they'd have been portrayed in Sea of Dreams, but it seems unlikely that they'd be any different really. One addition BioShock 2 made was the inclusion of the Rumbler, a bazooka-wielding menace capable of exploding groups of splicers. Interestingly enough, they were going to be added to the original game, but were cut due to time constraints. But even though they're supposed to be intimidating, telekinesis nullifies all of their attacks, so as long as that plasmid's equipped, you came out of the fights without even a scratch. But yeah, they certainly were going to make an appearance from the start. Again, splicer behavior was changed too, so the early version of the game would be much less of barreling into rooms guns blazing and smoking everything and everyone in your path. You'd scare off individuals, but worry about controlling large groups. One major change between the release and the original plan would be a lack of multiplayer. There was this strange trend towards the end of the 7th generation to cram a multiplayer into everything. Even iconic single-player games such as Uncharted, Arkham, Assassin's Creed, Elder Scrolls, and The Last of Us got totally uncalled for multiplayer modes, and BioShock 2 was no different. Not that it was bad. Actually, Fall of Rapture was pretty fun. Nothing amazing, but fun. If it ever felt too simple, lacking ingenuity, that's because the Fall of Rapture multiplayer was a last-second tacked-on addition that certainly didn't need to exist. For this theoretical Sea of Dreams game, yeah, that's not a thing. And I needn't mention Big Sister again. BioShock 2 is a mixed bag of a game. With every step forward came another step backwards. Now, would sticking to some older design decisions have completely fixed every problem, making it even more amazing than the first BioShock? Probably not. I'm sure the player would still feel too overpowered, the Gathering Horde mode would get repetitive, and Rapture, along with its characters, would still have that been there, done that feeling. But I feel like with changes like a single stalking Big Sister, a more challenging Big Sister, a kidnapping scheme to stop, less John Wayne gunning down everyone in your path, less retconning, a lack of multiplayer, and a few twists and turns along the way would have definitely elevated BioShock 2 to be a far better game than what we got in 2010. Now again, the final product is not a bad game. Objectively speaking, it's pretty good, far better than what would come next, and the Minerva's Den DLC might be one of the best DLCs I've ever played. Actually, I'm shocked BioShock 2 came out as well as it did, considering its extremely rushed production that barely involved anyone from the first game. The writer and main driving force behind BioShock and Irrational Games, Ken Levine, jumped straight into Infinite after the first game, not even touching BioShock 2. With a fraction of the time and talent of the original, 2K Marin still pushed out a totally competent game that would satisfy the fans. Could it have been better? Certainly. But is it the worst thing in the world? No, that's called Burial at Sea. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video on what could have been BioShock 2. A lot of other YouTubers have already done retrospectives and analyses of the game, so I wanted to take a different approach and compare some of the early ideas for the game to the final product. So, what do you think about one of gaming's most forgotten sequels? Is it good? Is it bad? Best part? Worst part? Let me know in the comments down below. And remember, if you enjoyed this video, to please leave a like and subscribe. See you next week.